Hello, my name is Catherine, and I'm reading the second part of the fifth chapter from the book The Power of Positive Thinking, Chapter 5, How to Create Your Own Happiness. A year passed, and one night in Grand Central Station, Ralston Young was paged to come to the information booth. A young woman was there who said, "I bring you a message from the dead. Before she died, my mother told me to find you and to tell you how much you helped her last year when you took her to the train in her wheelchair. She will always remember you, even in eternity. She will remember you, for you were so kind and loving and understanding." Then the young woman burst into tears and sobbed in her grief. Ralston stood quietly watching her. Then he said, "Don't cry, Missy, don't cry. You shouldn't cry. Give a prayer of thanksgiving." Surprised, the girl said, "Why should I give a prayer of thanksgiving?" "Because," said Ralston, "many people have become orphans much younger than you. You had your mother for a long, long time, and besides, you still have her. You will see her again. She is near to you now, and she always will be near to you. Maybe," he said, "she's right here with us now, the two of us as we talk." The sobs ended and the tears dried. Ralston's kindness had the same effect on the daughter as it had had on the mother. In this huge station, with thousands of people passing by, the two of them felt the presence of one who inspired this wonderful red cap to go around this way spreading love. "Where love is," said Tolstoy, "God is." And we might add, when God and love where God and love are, there is happiness. So, a practical principle in creating happiness is to practice love. A genuinely happy man is a friend of mine, H.C. Mattern, who, with his equally happy wife, Mary, travels throughout the country in the course of his work. Mr. Mattern carries a unique business card, on the reverse side of which is stated the philosophy, which has brought happiness to him and his wife, and hundreds of others who have been so fortunate as to feel the impact of their personalities. The card reads as follows: "The way to happiness: keep your heart free from hate, your mind from worry. Live simply, expect little, give much. Fill your life with love. Scatter sunshine. Forget self, think of others. Do as you would be done by. Try this for a week and you will be surprised." As you read these words, you may say, "There is nothing new in that." Indeed, there is something new in it if you have never tried it. When you start to practice it, you will find it the newest, freshest, most astonishing method of happy and successful living you have ever used. What is the value of having known these principles all your life if you have never made use of them? Such inefficiency in living is tragic. For a man to have lived in poverty when all the time right on his doorstep is gold indicates an unintelligent approach to life. This simple philosophy is the way to happiness. Practice these principles for just one week, as Mr. Matten suggests, and if it has not brought you the beginnings of real happiness, then your happiness, then your unhappiness is very deep seated indeed. Of course, in order to give power to these principles of happiness and make them work, it is necessary to support them with a dynamic quality of mind. You are not likely to secure effective results, even with spiritual principles, without spiritual power. When one experiences a dynamic spiritual change inwardly, success with happiness producing ideas becomes extraordinarily easy. If you begin to use spiritual principles, however awkwardly, you will gradually experience spiritual power inwardly. I can assure you that this will give you the greatest surge of happiness you have ever known. It will stay with you long too, as long as you live a God centered life. In my travels about the country, I have been encountering an increasing number of genuinely happy individuals. These are persons who have been practicing the techniques described in this book and which I have presented in other volumes and in other writings and talks, and which other writers and speakers have likewise been giving to receptive people. It is astonishing how people can become inoculated with happiness through an inner experience of spiritual change. People of all types everywhere are having this experience today. In fact, it has become one of the most popular phenomena of our times. And if it continues to develop and expand, the person who has not had a spiritual experience will soon be considered old fashioned and behind the times. Nowadays, it is smart to be spiritually alive. It is old foggyism to be ignorant of that happiness producing transformation which people everywhere are enjoying at this time. Recently, after finishing a lecture in a certain city, a big, strapping, fine looking man came up to me. He slapped me on the shoulder with such force that it almost bowled me over. "Doctor," he said in a booming voice, "how about coming out with the gang? We are having a big party at the Smith's house, and we would like you to come along. It's going to be a whale of a shindig, and you ought to get in on it." So ran his racy invitation. Well, obviously, this didn't sound like a proper party for a preacher, and I was hesitant. I was afraid I might cramp everyone's style, so I began to make excuses. "Oh, forget it," my friend told me. "Don't worry. This is your kind of party. You will be surprised. Come on along. You will get the kick of your life out of it." So I yielded and went along with my buoyant and racy friend, and he was certainly one of the most infectious personalities I had encountered in quite a while. Soon we came to a big house set back among trees, with a wide, sweeping driveway up to the front door. From the noise issuing from the open windows, there was no question but that quite a party was in progress, and I wondered what I was getting myself into. My host, with a great shout, dragged me into the room, and we had quite a handshaking time. And he introduced me to a large group of gay and exuberant people. They were happy, joyous lot of folk. I looked around for a bar, but there wasn't any. All that was being served was coffee, fruit juice, ginger ale, sandwiches, and ice cream. But there was lots of those. These people must have stopped somewhere before coming here, I remarked to my friend. He was shocked and he said, "Stop somewhere? Why? You don't understand. These people have got the spirit all right, but not the kind of spirit you are thinking about. I am surprised at you," he said. "Don't you realize what makes this crowd so happy? They have been renewed spiritually. They have got something. They have been set free from themselves. They have found God as a living, vital, honest to goodness reality." "Yes," he said. "They have got spirit all right, but it isn't the kind that you get out of a bottle. They have got spirit in their hearts." Then I saw what he meant. This wasn't a crowd of sad-faced, stodgy people. They were the leaders of that town, businessmen, lawyers, doctors, teachers, society people, and a lot of simpler folk besides. And they were having a wonderful time at this party, talking about God, and they were doing it in the most natural manner imaginable. They were telling one another about the changes that had occurred in their lives through revitalized spiritual power. Those who have the naive notion that you can't laugh and be gay when you are religious should have been in on that party. Well, I went away from that party with a Bible verse running through my mind. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. That was the light I saw on the faces of those happy people. An inner light was reflected outwardly on their faces, and it came from an effervescent spiritual something that they had taken into themselves. Life means vitality, and these people obviously were getting their vitality from God. They had found the power that creates happiness. This is no isolated incident. I venture the assertion that in your own community, if you will look around for them, you will find lots of people like these, just like those described above. If you don't find them in your own hometown, come to the Marble Collegiate Church in New York City, and you will find them by the score. But you can get the same spirit by reading this book if you practice the simple principles set forth. As you read this book, believe what you read, because it is true. Then start working on the practical suggestions the book contains, and you too will have the spiritual experience that produces this quality of happiness. I know this is so because many of those to whom I have referred and shall refer in later chapters got their vital new life in the same way. Then, having been changed inwardly, you will begin to create out of yourself not unhappiness, but a happiness of such quality and character that you will wonder if you are living in the same world. As a matter of fact, it won't be the same world because you are not the same. And what you are determines the world in which you live. So, as you change, your world changes too. If happiness is determined by our thoughts, it is necessary to drive off the thoughts which make for depression and discouragement. This can be done first by simply determining to do it. Second, by utilizing an easy employed technique which I suggested to a businessman. I met him at a luncheon and have seldom heard such gloom as he got off. His conversation would have been ultra depressing had I permitted it to affect me. It reeked with pessimism. To hear him talk, you would think everything was headed for ruin. Of course, the man was tired. Accumulated problems had swamped his mind, which was seeking release in retreat from a world which was too much for his depleted energy. His principal trouble was in his depressed thought pattern. He needed an infusion of light and faith. So, rather boldly, I said, "If you want to feel better and stop being miserable, I can give you something that will fix you up." "What can you do?" he snorted. Are you a miracle worker?" "No," I replied, "but I can put you in touch with a miracle worker who will drain off that unhappiness of yours and give you a new slant on life. I mean that," I concluded as we separated. Apparently, he became curious, for he got in touch with me later, and I gave him a little book of mine called Thought Conditioner. It contains 40 health and happiness producing thoughts. Inasmuch as it is a pocket sized booklet, I suggested that he carry it for easy consultation and that he drop one of the suggested thoughts in his mind every day for 40 days. I further suggested that he commit each thought to memory, thus allowing it to dissolve in consciousness, and that he visualize this healthy thought sending a quieting and healing influence through his mind. I assured him that if he would follow this plan, these healthy thoughts would drive off the diseased thoughts that was sapping his joy, energy, and creative ability. The idea at first impressed him as being a bit queer, and he had his doubts, but he followed directions. After about 3 weeks, he called me on the phone and shouted, "Boy, this sure works! It is wonderful. I have snapped out of it, and I wouldn't have believed it possible." He remains snapped out of it and is a genuinely happy person. This pleasant condition resulted because he became skilled in the power to create his own happiness. He later commented that his first mental hurdle was honestly to face the fact that while his unhappiness made him miserable, yet he was at home in self pity and self punishment thoughts. He knew that these sick thoughts were the cause of his trouble, but he shrank from the effort required to desire change sufficiently to actually go about changing. But when he began systematically to insert healthy spiritual thoughts into his mind as directed, he began first to want new life, then to realize the thrilling fact that he could have it, then the even more amazing fact that he was getting it. The result was that after some 3 weeks of a self improvement process, new happiness burst upon him. Everywhere in this country today are groups of people who have found the happy way. If we can have even one such group in every city, town, and hamlet in America, we can change the life of this country within a short time. And what kind of group do we mean? Let me explain. I was speaking in a western city and returned to my hotel room rather late. I wanted to get a little sleep, for I was to be up at 5:30 next morning to catch a plane. As I was preparing for bed, the telephone rang and a lady said, "There are about 50 of us at my house waiting for you." I explained that I could not come due to the early hour of my departure in the morning. "Oh," she said, "two men are on their way to get you. We have been praying for you, and we want you to come and pray with us before you leave the city." I am glad I went, though I had very little sleep that night. The men who came for me were a couple of alcoholics who had been healed by the power of faith. They were two of the happiest, most lovable fellows you can imagine. The home to which they took me was packed. People were sitting on the stairways, on the tables, on the floor. One man was even perched on the grand piano. And what were they doing? They were having a prayer meeting. They told me that 60 such prayer groups were going on in that city all the time. I was never in such a meeting. They were anything but a stuffy group. They were released. They were a released, happy crowd of real people. I found myself strangely moved. The spirit in that room was tremendous in its lifting force. The group would burst into song, and I never heard such singing. The room was filled with a wonderful spirit of laughter. Then a woman stood up. I saw that she had braces on her legs, and she said, "They told me I would never walk again. Do you want to see me walk?" And she walked up and down the room. "What did it?" I asked. "Jesus," she replied simply. Then another fine-looking girl said, "Did you ever see a victim of the narcotics habit?" Well, I was one, and I was healed. There she sat, a beautiful, modest, charming young woman, and she too said, "Jesus did it." Then a group who had drifted apart told me that they had been brought together and they were happier than ever before. "How did it come about?" I asked, and their reply was, "Jesus did it." A man said he had been a victim of alcohol, that he had dragged his family down until they were living in abject poverty, and he was a complete failure. And now, as he stood before me, he was a strong, healthy personality. I started to ask how, but he nodded and said, "Jesus did it." Then they burst into another song, and then someone dimmed the lights, and we all held hands around in a great circle. I had a feeling as though I had a hold of an electric wire. Power was flowing around the room. Without any question, I was the least spiritually developed person in that group. I knew in that moment that Jesus Christ was right there in that house, and those people had found him. They had been touched by his power. They had given He had given them new life. This life bubbled up in an irrepressible effervescence. This is the secret of happiness. All else is secondary. Get this experience, and you've got real, unalloyed happiness. The best the world offers. Don't miss it. Whatever you do in this life, for this is it. And that's the end of chapter 5. I hope you enjoyed it. My name is Catherine, and I will read the first part of the 6th chapter for you tomorrow. Have a lovely day. Bye bye.